if he ends up becoming reelected just because of the play and the circumstances of feeling whoever the GOP contendant is even worse or crazier than Obama, and with the default he ends up winning the race of the less of two evil type thing scenario, which is what elements in the White House are trying to play out by presenting us with some of these kook candidates in the GOP. Not saying all of them are kooks, but some of them are definitely kooks. They want World War III. They want things that are rather out there and that are not in the best interest of anybody. So, let's move on with the show. On his radio show, January 4th, 2012, Mark Levin directly labeled the actions of President Barack Obama regarding appointing members to the National Labor Relations Board and director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is a new bureau, just another way of sucking money out of us that Obama created, without going through Constitution-required Senate hearings as, quote, forthright statement of a dictator, unquote. And that we have a constitutional crisis, unquote, as well. That's obvious. I mean, if we have a dictatorship or a statement of a dictator, I think we do have a constitutional crisis here. Anybody who says, as I mentioned, that they don't need Congress, they just need what would be themselves to decide something because they don't like how the House is acting. They're not acting fast enough. So if they don't act, I have to. Well, we got checks and balances, buddy, according to what would be our Constitution. So let's get rid of this ugly face and put back on the website here, main page. So, December 31st, the White House Deputy Press Secretary Josh Earnest, in a speech, stated, quote, now that he's free, regarding Obama, from having to put out these fires, the president will have a larger playing field. If that includes Congress, all the better. But that's no longer a requirement. The president is no longer tied to Washington, unquote. Did you hear that? I'm going to read it again, just in case. I want to make sure, because I give people information. People say, prove it. And I give them evidence. They say, show me the British are an empire. And I say, okay, I've got hours worth of stuff. I got more than you want to hear. And I give it to them. I lay it on the table. And they say, prove it. I say, okay. And I prove the points. They say, prove that. And I prove those things too. They say, prove this. And it's just like, hello, how you can just keep me going with this, but do you see the evidence lining up? So it's kind of funny, it's kind of sad, but it's like some people, you take the horse to water, but you can't make the damn thing drink. It's kind of like that. There are so many people in society, ignorant folks. I deal with these people every day, idiots, that ultimately just won't see certain things. They refuse. They can't. No matter how much evidence you give them, no, it just can't be. Sorry, idiot, it is. So, I'm going to read this to you one more time. Press Secretary, Deputy Secretary stated on the 31st after the Obama administration passed this law. Now that, quote, now that he is free from having to put out these fires, the president will have a larger playing field. If that includes Congress, all the better. But that's no longer a requirement. The president is no longer tied to Washington. That's reality, folks. He's no longer tied to Washington. And this is what was intended. When you see what would be, and this is my next forecast, when you see tanks on the streets and troops on the streets by summer of 2013, when you see the price of food double by December, from now to December of 2013, the end of next year, when you see these factors coming into play, when you see these things happening, not just hearing things on TV and seeing things that makes you question and wonder, but when you really see it, you will believe it, if you want to or not. Former CIA officer Philip Giraldi stated, quote, if you think, quote, that the Weimar Republic Germany is a long time ago and far away, so it can't happen here, You are wrong. It can happen here. And unless something is done to stop it, it almost certainly will happen here. It is happening already. That's a former officer of the CIA, Philip Giraldi. He's letting you know, Weimar Germany. What is Weimar Germany, for those that don't know the history, since I know many of you out there don't? Weimar Germany, 1923, is where we come out with the word hyperinflation, which is something anybody who knows me and my works have heard in my doctrines and speeches going back years, back to 2004, 2005, going to what would be the aspect of hyperinflation, which means the value of the dollar, the buying power deteriorates. I mean, what you're able to buy today. And I've gave an example similar to this before. You want to go buy a brand new Dodge Ram pickup truck, fully extended cab, 4-wheel drive, big horn, Hemi, so on and so forth. You want that with the, you know, all the full kit and caboodle? That's $65,000. How much did we pay for one of those once upon a time back in 1996? Literally, we paid 30 grand. 30 grand for that same truck. 15 years later is twice as much over that. That's an example. I mean, I only drank organic milk. I pay $6 a gallon for organic milk. That's horrible. Anyways, so Al Gore dismisses the presidential hopeful Republican candidate Ron Paul as, quote, being silly. During his opening remarks to students at Shaker High School in Ohio, President Obama stated before the audience that, quote, I want you to know that you're the reason why I ran for this office in the first place. You remind me of what we are still fighting for. You inspire me, unquote. The audience began to break out in hysterical laughter. Not just because he sounds funny, but I mean really. Because he told the crowd that the reason why I ran for president is because of you. You inspire me. I mean, he had high schoolers. I mean, people, you know, they put down the youth. They think that, you know, we and the youth are dumb. High school students cracked up laughing at this president. They knew better than that. So if you don't, what does that mean? Even with gray hairs of wisdom, you may want to turn to the youth because chances are they're in touch with something you're not. And that's one interesting thing as well. You know, a point and comment that my preacher made one time. A very respectable guy named Tim. He stated, as you get older, the ship gets harder to turn. And that's reality. You get set into the course, into your ways. And it's a lot harder to turn that boat. But somebody that's 18 to 30 years old or whatever, that's still getting established, still developing their views in the world, more privy and savvy to what's happening on the streets, street knowledge and street smarts in real time, sees a lot of the dynamics and things that are unfolding right there and then that a lot of the older people might not be as in touch with. So there's wisdom and learning and things that come with age of experience. Can't doubt that. But at the same time, through that experience and through certain things that can be a benefit through age, there's also detrimental aspects as things begin to slow down up here and otherwise, as the youth has that sharpness, that quickness. They may not necessarily be on cue, but they're sharp. So, here we go. Now we got to talk about Rick Santorum here. This guy's a joke, and he'll be on his way out of the race here shortly. I mean, it's kind of funny. Pretty much you didn't hear hardly anything about him. He was toasted on the other side, and then variables pop up, speculation, people talking about him giving $1 million to someone in in Iowa, so on and so forth, and then bam, he's up in the top tier, and whatnot. He's a top tier candidate, coincidentally enough. But I've got some stuff here that is absolutely kooky. As I mentioned, I had no intention to discuss anything regarding Rick Santorum, which is a individual running for the Republican presidential nomination. Well, first of all, besides the fact he has some deep connections to K Street, in other words, Wall Street interest, and he made a quote regarding, yeah, we had a meeting, and yeah, we talked about making sure that we have a fair representation on K Street. I admit that I pay attention to who is hiring, he states, and I think it's important for leadership to pay attention. Really what he's saying is he's going to kiss the ass of whoever has the money. And Wall Street, even though it's all fictitious through gambling debts and games and whatnot, right now they have all of the so-called money. It's kind of a game, and I won't go too far into that one and how that works and how we can bankrupt them and restart and recapitalize the banking system legally through the Constitution. But right now, with how we're being played, that's how it is. But this is the thing that I want to discuss. It has nothing to do with Wall Street and Rick Santorum. It has to do with Rick Santorum's family. Ultimately, he had a dead, what do you call it? Okay, in 1996, his wife Karen gave birth to a child who lived just 2 hours. That's it. The Santorums, him and his wife, brought the dead baby Gabriel, their child, home to meet their children, with Karen subsequently, which Carol described in her book. I guess Karen wrote a book on this and describes this in detail. Excuse me, something which I'll be going into more, and I'll probably be bringing up again and discussing through the blog, Facebook, Twitter, and what would be the next monthly report for February. But this guy is a real sick freak. I mean, setting aside any aspects, if you like big government, small government, Wall Street, or not, this kook, his wife had a child. And I have another article, which I must have forgot to print, and I will obtain this. This is on my Twitter link at Ilonummi, ILONUMMI, on Twitter. But Rick Santorum had a child, as I mentioned. The child died. Now, I'm not sure, here it stated it was 2 hours later, the child was dead. The other article I have says that it was a stillborn child and already dead. I don't know which way, but this is what I do know. And the facts show themselves, and even what would be, I'll have some video footage I'll be placing up online, and I saw last night from, I believe it was NBC, that stated, I mean, just how weird this guy is. They had a dead baby, and they took the dead baby home and played with the child with the rest of their children. That's right. A dead baby, they played with it like it was alive, and they even slept with it that night. This is regarded and discussed in the book by Rick Santorum's wife. I believe her name was Karen. Is that her name? So, yeah, Karen Santorum in her book in 1996. What kind of a sick freak brings home a dead body, baby or not, and plays with it like it is alive? I mean, this is just out of control. I mean, I got a crazy uncle down in California that carried around his wife's ashes with him for years afterward and whatnot, and he's kind of loony too. His name is Harold, but ultimately, I mean, this makes Harold look like he's actually functioning quite properly up here. I mean, this here actually, this really blows. I mean, this had me just so baffled and so just, wow. I mean, this is a very different piece for me to be discussing regarding a political economic show. I mean, I have my own opinions. I have my own things based upon reality. I personally support, as you out there know, Ron Paul. I'm the first one to state that Mr. Paul and I don't agree on everything. As a matter of fact, some of our economic principles and how we want to approach the crisis is a little different. We agree on certain aspects of abolishing the Federal Reserve and certain elements, but I don't agree with Austrian economics. I agree with American economics as instilled within our Constitution and whatnot. So I believe a real, sturdy, stable candidate as such as Mr. Paul means well and whatnot, and I believe he's the best thing that our nation has going for it at the moment. But, I'll say where I agree with him and say where I don't and whatever, but there is no comparison to him or the other candidates. There is no comparison to him and who's already in office, old Black Bush, Obama. with the Hitler mustache that I showed you earlier. There's no comparison. Mr. Paul does not want World War III. Flat out. So if you want to know why they make him look like such a kook on TV, the establishment, is because he's very different. Every single other candidate, Rick Perry, dead baby playground player Santorum, and all these other people, Bachman, and the list just goes on and on and on. Windsock Romney, that just, changes policies depending what's popular day by day. He just is like a windsock, whatever way the wind's blowing, he goes that way. I mean, you have less integrity from him than you have from a flimsy shoestring. Talk about policies for hire. I mean, just when you thought old poor simpering George W. and Herbert Walker Bush were bad, I mean, this thing here, I mean, he's going to be really putty in the hands of Wall Street, obviously. I mean, he wants it bad to be elected. So, as I mentioned, Ron Paul is being ridiculed. They're playing all kinds of dirty games against him. As a matter of fact, look into this. When you see something happen for the first time ever, when they say we're going to do things differently this year with elections, you better be worried. What does that mean? Well, if it's a change, it must be something good, right? Well, that's what they'd like to say, but I mean, we see change and sometimes, well, what you get is change. So, with that being stated, what are we going to get? The changes that were made in Iowa this year were this. They stated that they were going to tally what would be the outcome of these caucuses in a secret location. Now that's interesting, a secret location. And it's all because they were worried about hackers anonymous, which actually have ties in with our CIA and government, believe it or not. They don't talk about that on TV. Nor do they want to tell you that a lot of the what would be Occupy Wall Street aspects, there are, as proven by Mr. Alex Jones and other people in LA, there are provocateurs of what would be federal and state law enforcement that are being involved in getting things excited and getting crazy. So while the main jest of these Occupy Wall Street folks, or Occupy New York, or what would be Occupy Arlington, Occupy whatever, your block, that the main jest of these people, obviously they're not unified by any one individual idea. They think, many of these folks unfortunately think, just basically, rape, pillage, and, take the money from the rich, and that will somehow make the rest of us better. And that's not necessarily the answer either, because it's not the rich people necessarily who put us into this predicament. It's government in certain aspects that are there. So if you really want a change in the dynamic and a change of the course, you don't just rape, kill, or murder the, type thing, the rich guy that lives down the street that you're jealous of because he has a nice car and a beautiful wife and you don't. That ultimately, you go for government. And I don't mean you kill them either. I just mean you kill what would be their abilities to kill us. So what does that mean? That starts from voting. That starts right here, what we're doing. Sharing information, spreading the word, spreading this website to your friends, to your family. NoSpinNewsSource.com. Yeah, here we discuss variables that are out there. But when you look at our track record in history, I've been on the ball. I have a track record of forecasts that makes people like Ben Bernanke and all the so-called professionals look like dirt. Why is that? Because my mind is not in the gutter, my mind's in reality. How do I know all so well what we need to do with the economy? How do I know all so well what you need to do? It's because I read the Constitution. That's why. And not just that, I actually understand certain variables within there regarding Article 1, Section 8, the credit system. The original, first Constitution of the United States, as created by Alexander Hamilton, first Treasury Secretary, appointed under George Washington. So if you like the Constitution, if you like America, if you like prosperity, if you like the idea of not being indebted to fictitious gambling debts, of what would be these financial derivatives and speculation, these games, that's what they are, gambling debts. That if you want to get out of that, we got to go back to the constitutional principles that work. If you like prosperity, if you like the Constitution, If you like George Washington and who and what we are, then we got to get back to these principles. We're supposed to be a credit system, not a monetary system. Franklin Roosevelt died. Ever since then, we had a deterioration of policy. The agenda of the United States never was fully fulfilled. Yes, Nazi Germany was destroyed, but the problem is this. Who created Nazi Germany, which was the British Empire? We never got around to, since Roosevelt died, to put them in play and check. So because of it, what we did was we put out a fire, a big forest fire of the British Empire. But the problem is you can't just go around putting out the fires that the firebug, psycho, lights up. That's not how you deal with terror. That's not how you deal with reality. Every time someone gets poor, you just, whatever, just give them a can of soup or just wash the home or this or that. No, it's not an individual base. It's not down at the level. It's a top-down approach. You want to take the giant down, you don't slap at its ankles, you go for the jugular. That's what you do. And you take it down and it falls. And that's what I recommend we do. Now, it rests in Hamilton. It rests in what would be the national bank, the credit system. When we went with these principles, we've pulled out of dark times in our history. When we look at what would be, what motivated to create this to begin with, such as the debts and the predicament that we were in 1812 and following that with the war, with those debts that some people thought that we should just write off, such as Thomas Jefferson, which was a good man but a bit confused about some of these economic policies, kind of like other people are today, such as Ron Paul. But as I mentioned, he's still the best of what we've got. And he's learnable. He has a heart and a mind that can work and that wants to work. And unlike him, or unlike Santorum, he's not worried about what K Street's doing. He's not worried about Wall Street. He's worried about Main Street. He's worried about you. And that's the difference between what would be a Ron Paul presidency and any of these other freaks of natures thus far that's on the platform, is that he puts you, the middle and lower class, the general welfare, on the plate and as the centerpiece to be focused on. So he may be confused over a variable or two. Nobody's perfect. But I'll tell you what, you look at the integrity, the track record of that man, it's solid. Often, if there's 400 and, what would be 34 members of the House, and there's that vote one way, and there's one vote that's against some bill, or that's different, often that one vote is Ron Paul. Now, some people have brought up recently, well, how effective is Ron Paul going to be as a president or as a legislature, being in a legislature, period? As mentioned recently, only, 3 bills ever, or something along those lines, I believe it was 3, that Ron Paul has ever put forth has actually ever passed the House. So some people say that's a sign of some poor statesmanship. But Mr. Paul was able to turn that around, ultimately, and quite sufficiently and impressive, I have to acknowledge, by stating this. Well, this isn't necessarily proof that I'm not good as a legislature. This is proof that the main jest of look where government's taking us. See what happens? See where the 99 point some odd percent of the government is going in the direction? So in the long run, where they tried to use this as him being so far out there out of the box that he's just not able to do anything, he was able to turn that around and say, no, the majority is ruling, and look at where the majority is taking our country to. So in the long run, that switched things around to where being that one single vote didn't make him seem like the kook. It made him seem like the man of genius and with integrity, which is exactly what Mr. Paul has. Now, I've mentioned in the past that there are a lot of interesting variables regarding the supposed killing of what would have been bin Laden, which bolstered this president's rating and things up and ego and everything else. But as I've mentioned on what would be past MP3 shows, that there are individuals that have came forth that have stated that this is very, very different than what happened. It's interesting, as what would be, and since I'm sure this is before a tribunal, therefore we don't know exactly the variables of the dates and whatever, we have Dr. Steve Pieczenik, which is a heavy-hitting hand and major influential arm within what would be the Navy, who has stated, and this is somebody who's involved with PSYOPs. Mr. Steve Pieczenik is still to this day an instructor at the cadet naval school, and what would be has been involved with toppling numerous regimes and elements in government and is privy to a lot of facts. This is somebody who is not a whistleblower, not a conspiracy theorist, whatever, but is stepping outside the box dramatically over the last several months and has stated and put his repertoire on the line. And this is the individual that Patriot Games, the movie of Harrison Ford, was based upon, is the actual life of this individual and whatnot, which can't even discuss most of his history. It's so top secret. Dr. Steve Pieczenik, as I've mentioned before, has stated that the compound that was raided was not bin Laden's, and he would be going before a court prior to 2011 ending, in which he was going to be disclosing the information of a very high senior ranking general in the military who disclosed to him information that, and this was years ago, back in Bush's regime, that supposedly Osama bin Laden had been dead since approximately 2004 or 2005 range, supposedly. And that they were, the powers that be, Bush and company, had planned on rolling his body out. It was froze on ice, according to his testimony, and they were going to use it as a publicity stunt to help him garner a re-election. Now, supposedly, and I know this sounds very out there, and many people hearing this are going to be quick to dismiss this, and I'm letting you know, I'm not putting my reputation on the line and saying that this is the cold facts. I wasn't there. I didn't see bin Laden die or not. I don't know Dr. Steve Pieczenik, personally. I'm just providing the facts of statements that have been made by the people, showing the evidence, and allowing you, the people, to put this together and formulate your own opinion and belief, which is what I do. That, and all I can do is show many variables and many aspects that Obama has stated, obviously don't match what happened. So does that mean it was a complete lie? Not necessarily, but there's more to it than what meets the eye. So Dr. Steve Pieczenik stated that it was because of the Clintons and individuals with Hines, Teresa Hines, and what would be Kerry, John Kerry, that good old politics were played, to where because they were privy of this information and what the Bush administration had planned on doing, that ultimately they put pressure on the administration and they never rolled that body out, and so they never used that to garnish that extra sensation. Not that they really needed it under the circumstances. Bush was pretty well loved, especially his first 4 years. It wasn't until his second term that people began to come out of the hump. So Steve Pieczenik, with this case, which is what he's brought up, is interesting, and I believe more is going to come out about this through time. We have an article here regarding LATimes.com article entitled, if you want to Google this, from January 5th, titled, "Pentagon Investigating Possible Leak of Bin Laden Raid Details," which is actually a decent article. And it's going in the direction of hinting that makes you wonder if there is more than what meets the eye regarding this president, and specifically the killing of what we believe supposedly was bin Laden. Which I must remind you that they supposedly, remember, they didn't bring back any pictures. No pictures, no evidence. It's too top secret, they say. They say we can't show his face on TV because it'll upset the Arab world too much. Now that's the cheesiest excuse in the world. If you believe it, you are an idiot. Just to let you know. Really. You're dumb, naive, and an idiot. Sorry to tell you that, but I'm just letting you know. It's reality. And you'll see. You laugh at me now, go ahead, say there won't be troops on the streets, say food won't double in 2 years or less, say this guy doesn't deserve that, and we'll see who's laughing and who's not in a couple more years from now or less. Just like scenarios locally. I walked by people locally that laughed and scoffed in my elections discussing these variables of the Super Congress back in August and this and that. People laughed at me when I said we're stepping toward a dictatorship. People laughed and scoffed. Now many of these people I walk by with my head held very high in the air with a big smile, they don't want to look into my eyes. As their husband that's a cop, as their wife that's a firefighter, as whatever is getting canned and losing what would be their jobs and resources. I'm the guy that said, I told you so. Change you can believe in? Sure. So, did the Obama administration release classified information to Hollywood notables for a film about the operation that killed Osama bin Laden? That's right. That's a question that Representative Congressman Peter T. King, Republican from New York, wants answered in a response. The Pentagon's Inspector General has launched an investigation, King disclosed Thursday. Quote, we plan to begin subject investigation immediately. Patricia A. Brannan, Deputy Inspector General for Intelligence and Special Program Assessments, wrote in a memo that King emailed to reporters. At issue is whether the filmmakers, director Catherine Bigelow and screenwriter Mark Bowl,